Speaking Truth to Power. Welcome to the series presented to you by the Christian Professionals and Businesspersons Forum of India. In this series, we've been in a very engaging way bringing real-life examples, bringing incidents from the Bible, and trying to understand how people did respond to power. Also, what is truth and how have people been speaking the truth to power? In these very engaging conversations, we've had with us L.T. Jayachandran and Anand Pillai, who've been gracious enough to share with us their life experiences with this speaking truth to power. We've been talking about the right response. We've been talking about how people in the Bible times responded according to the rules of the God of the Bible. We've been looking at people who've been doing that. Takes us to this question: what does it take for someone to speak truth to power?
As I mentioned in one of the earlier episodes, that one of the results of human rebellion against God was our desire to control one another. And even in the corporate world today, we have come across this phrase, servant leadership, which means you have to empower people. And therefore, speaking truth to power is not to use the same language, the same weapons as we get from the world. Now, a simple example, going back a few years, is that you have the tragedy of September 11th, 2001.
Yes.
And then the President of the US decides that you should reply to that by dropping bombs. And then you have this ISIL created, and they are now dropping bombs all over the world. So what is actually happening, and I'm not giving some kind of a simplistic, pacifistic reply.
Okay.
I'm saying that when you begin to answer the issues of the world at the same level and not from a higher level, you will not be able to get the desired response. Now, when I mean the higher, I'm not necessarily meaning the more powerful. It could even mean the weaker.
Okay.
I think that is probably the genius of the cross. Paul, for example, in the first chapter of 1 Corinthians, he says that the cross is foolishness to the Greeks, it's a stumbling block to the Gentiles, but the weakness of God is stronger than men, the foolishness of God is wiser than men. So he is actually bringing out the paradox of replying from the position of a cruciform way. That means a cross-centered way.
Cross-centered way.
So that will be my simplest thing. We'll explain it later.
That's a wonderful thought. Anand, whether it's nations or people, isn't that normal to respond the way we did? You hit me, I hit you back, you say something at me, and then I want to throw back something at you. Isn't that the normal way?
Well, but that most certainly is the normal way, but that's not the right way.
Okay.
As the Lord Jesus said, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword, So if you try that, you'll have to really be one up on that. But on your original question, what does it take for a person to speak truth to a person in power? I have two examples or two situations, and in the biblical context, and of course a third one in my own context. Let's take the biblical context. I talked about that book of Esther, where there is this mass annihilation order that is
of the
given.
people of God.
And Esther was in our terminology, in a position of power. And she was the closest contact that Mordecai, one of the Jews who was affected by that order, had. And she actually happened to be his cousin. So she was silent. So in our Manu situation, she was not misusing power, she was not abusing power, but she was not using the power that she had, non-use. So that was the situation. And she was under the belief or under the conviction, if I may use the word, that okay, what is it that I can do? There is a law that is passed that unless the king calls me or solicits me, I can't go. That was the time when Mordecai went and spoke the truth to that person in power. And this is the statement that he made: deliverance for the Jews will come with or without you. But who knows that God has placed you into this position? Now power and position is coming into this position for such a time as this. And then he goes on to say, he is not coming there with the sign of helplessness. He knows that deliverance will come. And then he says, we will get delivered. But Just because you are in the palace, don't think that you and your household will be left. So he confronted, and sometimes what happens is we need to have the courage to confront, but confront it in a manner where there is no negotiation. That is one situation. The second situation,
and I'm going to just hold on to that first situation and turn to LT and ask, LT, what is it that God puts in people to have that, whatever it is, like Mordecai, to go and talk to Esthers of the world?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. You see, if Mordecai was interested only in pleasing Esther, he would not have spoken so, which means that he put his own kind of interest on the line in order to be able to stand up and speak to Esther. And in response, Esther does the same thing when she goes and stands before the king. Democracy in its various forms is built on this assumption that the one who stands up for the whole populace which elected him is one, him or her, is one who has died to his or her own interests. So in my view, and this is exactly what is one of the many dimensions of the cross, is that Jesus gives up his own right to his life so that today he can be our advocate, he can be our intercessor only because he has given up. So that is essentially what the church as a whole has to read. What is actually happening in the world around us is that people only feather their own nests, and it's only incidentally that others get benefited. Sometimes the politics comes down to that unfortunate level.
Yes.
I want to ask you a personal question, if you will permit me.
Yes.
Anand, have you experienced what LT is speaking in your real life?
Many times. I'll give you two situations. This was in one of my office situations. One of my team members, we had a downsizing, we were asked to cut down the number of staff, and one of my team members was going to be hit by that. But the manager, or we as managers, we were given a responsibility, listen, 4% of this particular grade
Numbers,
people
yes.
should go, 6% of this, whatever was given. And then they also gave an overall target of 15% of the cost to CTC, cost to the company. And the HR department started initiating action on that, and then they said, this is what we are doing organization wide and whatever. I said, no, listen, I am the manager, I am responsible for all these people. You have given us an overall target. Overall target is 15% and then 4% of this and 6% and all of that I will achieve. I will meet that objective without reducing the head count. How will I do that? Well, first of all, for example, at that particular level, I was entitled for business class travel. I was entitled to stay in a particular hotel. Okay, and so on. So what we did, and there were few senior people, we will cut down on our perquisites. We will cut down on some of our snacks, for example,
a very different
or
thing to
office meetings and so on, level of hotel. And then I had to work extra because the easiest thing was knock off so many people and then for you reach the budget. So what we did was, we said we will let go, and we took a 5 to 15% hit in our salary so that we can protect everybody. And none of them got affected. So when they heard that the senior management took the hit, they were benefited. And the interesting thing was, because of the fatness of the salary that is there, senior management 5 or 6% will be equal to some 10 to 15% for the entire organization. Long story short, what happened was, because of those sacrificial initiatives that we took, the people were benefited. But the point that I wanted to make was, I did what I did, putting my self-interest behind
on the firing line.
Others' interest.
That's the question we've been trying to answer. What does it take to speak truth to power? And you got your answers. More questions, more answers. Thank you for staying with us today. Till the next time, keep speaking the truth to power.